Hi all, I have some very naughty traps to show you against the Scandinavian defence today, so this will add to the traps playlist on the channel, which I'll give a link to. So let's have a look. E4, the Scandinavian defence or centre counter, is D5. It was condemned by Nimzovich as a waste of time, literally wasting a lot of time with the Queen coming out, but some grandmasters, notably for example Ian Rogers, have used it with success. It's shown to be quite solid, and after knight c3 black can either usually just go back here to d8 or to a5. Another trendy recent development is also queen d6. So there's a few options and it's still being explored, queen d6 in particular, in recent years. But in this video we're going to look at queen a5. So d4, not going out of the way to do anything ridiculous at the moment for white to trap black. c6, black makes an escape route back for the queen, just in case. It stabilizes the center against d5, and black is often wanting to further stabilize the center after bishop f5 and e6, usually to hold against the d5 break from white. It's with d5 that white can open up the position. Now, without white opening up the position, the loss of tempo might be more justified. We see bishop c4 and now bishop f5, and this is the start of what looks to be a rock solid position potentially if black can play e6. Now, our trap system here is still very much almost a book move. The most used book move is live book. In live book is knight f3. That is the most used move, standard move, sensible, and games could continue now with actually bishop d2 here, looking at the queen. But for the purposes of this trap video, bishop d2 is also very popular with 94 games in live book. It doesn't compromise white's position. It sets up some potential attacks on the queen, and there's some tactical dangers lurking here. Now, this video might be useful to Scandinavian experts or people that want to punt the Scandinavian as a surprise weapon. It's very important to note here the most common used moves if you want to play the Scandinavian like this. The most common two moves are knight f6 and e6. And there's particularly good reasons why these are quite popular here. Now, in this video we're going to explore knight d7. So your opponent might have been experimenting to play this opening and plays knight d7, and it's here that there are two trap moves of choice which you might want to consider. The first is kind of engine approved and actually leads to a definite advantage, almost guaranteed, and it's a move that even recently a super grandmaster has not played. He's had this position. Michael Adams has had this position at the recent PokerStars tournament and chose another move which is sensible and logical, but maybe not the most technically accurate, and I want to show you both. First of all, let's look at the Adams game first. Move 7, the opponent's played knight d7, which is actually technically a mistake, and we're going to see why. So queen e2 was Adams's move, and this occurred in against Alan Merry in the PokerStars 2015 tournament. And now black played basically a disastrous response here. He played knight gf6. So how is delaying what looks to be a standard book move for one move a disaster here? Well, maybe black was expecting that the queen isn't a tactical problem here, because the queen can always retreat, right? On knight d5 the queen can retreat. What do you play here with white though instead? If I give you 5 seconds you might want to pause the video, and it basically ends the game, because it's a massive advantage for white after this next move. So if I give you 5 seconds, what would you play here? Starting from now. Okay, knight b5. It takes away c7 from the queen, and it introduces another killer threat basically. Can you see after queen b6 what white plays in this position? If I give you 5 seconds. Yep, white plays knight d6 check, using the pinned pawn. You can see now why e6 is quite popular instead of knight d7, because that wouldn't have happened. The bishop would have been covering d6. This just won a piece in the recent Adams game, 2015. Black played on a bit, but basically he's losing that bishop. Queen takes b2 is of little consolation in the game. It carried on like that for a few moves, and obviously white was a winning piece up. So the trap is actually based on a technical inaccuracy. But what I found fascinating, I was only going to show you this, but what I found fascinating when researching this video a little bit more, is that actually against this inaccuracy there seems to be an engine move which has quite a lot of venom to it in this position, which might actually be stronger than queen e2, because on the queen e2 move black could respond with queen b6 sidestepping this major threat, and black should be okay here. The more accurate move, independent of black's responses to gain an advantage, is queen h5, believe it or not, pinning that bishop on f5. And the point is, on e6, can you see what white can play here on e6? If I give you 5 seconds now, which really shows again why knight d7 isn't a good idea in a way. What does white play in this position? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, bishop takes e6 using both pins. And say g6 to break that pin. Bishop takes d7 check is a big advantage for white. Black after queen h5 has to play very carefully. The best move might be g6, but now white can play queen e2 with dual threats of both g4, which kind of traps the bishop because there's no retreat to g6. It's been occupied by the pawn, and it's uncomfortable to play bishop e6, and also this knight b5 is still lurking. The most accurate response for black would be knight df6, and here white is significantly better after knight f3. For example, knight e5 and knight g5 are quite powerful here. Say bishop h6, this is awkward. White's just better here. Black has had to go into contortions. You know, stopping bishop h6 here is important. I'll just check that for you here. If e6 on this knight f3 move, if e6, this runs into big trouble. Not actually because of knight e5, although that threatens g4. Black could play h5, that's still quite good, but the stronger move here, now that black's committed all these pawns, is actually to play d5, and this is, we're talking more than +2 here for white. White's getting in that break to open up the position. Black's in serious trouble in this position. If c takes d, check, knight takes d5, hitting the queen, and if queen takes b5, knight c7 check, and if the queen goes back, then we exploit the newly opened diagonal from that earlier queen h5 by playing bishop c3. It's a total disaster area, this position. Say something like f6, it's a total disaster. It just looks horrendous for black. Too much pressure. Look at black's pieces. Here, black is actually losing a piece in this scenario, for example. Pieces are in trouble. So yes, there's, if you get this position then with white, let's turn that off. there seems to be two major trapping issues with knight d7, but the most accurate move, believe it or not, might be queen h5. It's ridiculous looking, but it causes a lot of damage to black's position to have to play g6. It's blocking in that bishop for g4. Knight b5 is even still on the cards, and if black has to do contortions now, otherwise he's in trouble with knight df6. It's not a great position already, this position here for black. So this is a trap system based actually on a technical inaccuracy. You could say, has white gone out of his way to set up a trap scenario? Well, it's the earlier queen e2 than the more usual knight f3. You could argue is more of a trap emphasis, but queen e2 of course is often a very good move in any case. It's just this tactical target, celebrating the tactical target. Bear in mind knight b5 as well as knight d5. So players might have been calculating at the board knight d7 without realizing the importance that in live book actually the two key moves here are actually knight f6 or e6 in this particular position. So subtleties being exploited really tactically. Comments or questions on YouTube. Hope you can use this in your own games as white. Thanks very much.